Welcome one and all to my YouTube channel Sermon Time. Today we take up our first parable of Jesus from the Gospel of John. The title of our sermon is The Blank Shepherd, and we are zeroed in on the parable Jesus told in John chapter 10. Now, this story is part of a larger narrative, including information about some who are seeking to steal and kill and destroy those who belong to God. We may have to take up that story another time, but suffice it to say, there are choices as to whom we shall follow. Today, we're going to focus our attentions on what it will mean to follow the Good Shepherd. As with parables we have looked at before, we shall gain much by considering the historical context of the day. Let's start with the passage and then move to the historical setting. Here's Jesus in John chapter 10, verses 11 to 14. I am the Good Shepherd. The Good Shepherd gives his life for the sheep. But a hireling, he who is not the shepherd, one who does not own the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and flees. And the wolf catches the sheep and scatters them. The hireling flees because he is a hireling, does not care about the sheep. I am the Good Shepherd, and I know my sheep, and I am known by my own. There are two contrasts made here in Jesus' parable. The first contrast is between the Good Shepherd and the hired hands, who watch over the sheep. Hirelings, they're called. Hirelings do not own the sheep. They run from danger. They don't care for the sheep. They have a job to do, and that's to watch over them. Shepherds, on the other hand, give their life for the sheep, care for the sheep, own the sheep, know his sheep. And his sheep, he says, know him. This is the first contrast. The second contrast is between the shepherd and the wolf. The wolf here is the one who comes to devour the sheep, as Jesus said, to steal and kill and destroy the sheep. Primarily, this represents Satan, but it also refers to any who seek to harm God's people, including the wolves in sheep's clothing Jesus talked about in another parable. People in the church who do not care for the sheep, who but seek only to harm them, well, they'll harm any they can, from administrators to pastors to members to guests of the church. O wolves, beware. These sheep have a good shepherd, and he takes these attacks on his people very, very personally. We are the apple of his eye, and he has warned such of those who would touch the apple. The Old Testament prophet Zechariah foretells in Zechariah chapter 2, verse 8, For thus says the Lord of hosts, he sent me after glory to the nations which plunder you. For he who touches you touches the apple of his eye. O wolves, beware. In previous messages, we have spoken much of the long suffering of God, the patience of God, how long he will put up with the mistreatment of his people. But whatever you do, don't cross a line with the Lord in your treatment of others. Stay as far away from that line as you possibly can, because there is a God who never forgets the troubles of his people and who caused them. He holds every one of our tears in his vial, keeps them close to his heart, loves those who endure the abuse in order to give God the chance to show his unconditional love. But you and I, we know a verse, a beautiful verse, a powerful verse of promise where God will wipe away every tear from our eyes. There shall be no more death, nor sorrow, nor crying in our life. There shall be no more pain, for the former things have passed away. And if he's ultimately going to end our sorrows and distresses and sicknesses and deaths, then let us endure to the end, my friends, for no matter how dark it gets here on earth, the sun comes in the morning. And now for the insight from Israel. Shepherds in Israel had a lot to contend with. The Bible mentions David fought lions and bears. Jesus, in his parable in John 10, mentions wolves. These are wild, vicious animals, and the way they shepherded sheep back in the day was to post a shepherd to protect them. During the day, the sheep would graze the fields. This made the sheep very vulnerable to attack, and the shepherd had to be constantly on his guard. I don't know if any of you have ever thought about taking on a lion or a bear or a wolf before, but you need a bit of courage to engage these battles. But the shepherd does it for his sheep. for the sake of his people. Here's a shepherd's field in Israel, in Bethlehem, in fact. Perhaps the very field where the shepherds were watching their sheep by night when the angels appeared at the birth of Jesus. Yeah, that field. You can see animals can attack from anywhere. So shepherds would erect walls to keep the sheep in and the wild beasts out. They would create a narrow passage so by day they could go out to the fields, and at night they could come under the protection of the wall. In the fields, the shepherds had to guard the sheep from all directions, but at night he only had to guard the door. In either case, day or night, the shepherd was the only one who stood between the sheep and their killers. You and I have someone standing between us and our enemies, those who would do us in. According to our parable, we have options, choices that we need to make. Two choices, in fact. Choice number one, which are you willing to follow? Who do you entrust with the protection of your soul, the vicious wolf or the good shepherd? Whose characteristics are you going to nurture in your life? Will you take the lives of others or add to them? Will you steal or enrich? Will you destroy or spend your days on earth ensuring everyone you meet gets to know the life-giving Jesus you know? That is the biggest decision any of us could ever face. Who's it going to be that we emulate on earth? Satan or Jesus? I hope you choose Jesus. Choice number two, the next decision we need to make. Are we going to be a hireling or a shepherd under Jesus? The sheep belong to Jesus, but our attitudes towards them will either resemble the hireling or the shepherd. If we're going to resemble the shepherd, then we need to be prepared to care for the sheep like he does. So many associate with the sheep, but they don't care for them. That's hireling stuff. Shepherds care, and we are all called to care, to do our part to ensure those here end up there. You may be thinking, yeah, I go to church, isn't that enough? Well, what would the shepherd say? Do you think it warms his heart that you warm his pew? Or does it warm his heart that you took ownership of the task of caring for one another in his absence? I think you know what Jesus is looking for. He's entrusted the care of his sheep to us. His thoughts on this subject are expressed well in 1 Corinthians 12:25. There should be no schism in the body, but the members should have the same care for one another. What should we have for one another? Care. We should matter to one another. That our faith is strong, that our courage is strong, that our relationship with Jesus is strong. If there are any physical needs, we are there for each other. If someone is sorrowful, we're there for them. If they're happy, we enter into their joy. Today for communion at church, we start with foot washing, the washing away of something before we take part in the communion emblems. Today, as we wash one another's feet, we will allow Jesus to wash away the wolf and the hireling in us, the parts of us who seek to do harm to the people of God here, and the parts of us that couldn't care less about the people of God here. Self-interest has no place in his church. Self-preservation, self-importance, self-aggrandizement. Here we lift up Jesus. We serve Jesus. We want to be like Jesus, the Good Shepherd. This parable Jesus told brings me to one, and the only one beef I have with anything Jesus has ever said. He refers to himself as the Good Shepherd. Friends, he's not good. He's great. He is the great shepherd. There is no one like Jesus. He cares more for us than he cares for himself. He is willing to risk his own life to save ours. In fact, he gave up his life to make sure we had his. He took our death to the cross and exchanged it for his life on us forever. Good Shepherd? He's great. No one loves us like Jesus. No one begins to compare. And we belong to him. And as such, since we belong to him, we are called to be like him. great shepherds, people who really care about other people, everyone, everywhere, all the time. God bless you all as you encounter this great shepherd and emulate him in your earth. Until next week, God be with you all.